Welcome to Heartful Beings, where we bring loving, grounded, and practical perspectives to living a heart-centered life with Janet Uribe and Milena Rodriguez.
This is the place where we have heart-centered conversations and share our own experiences about all things spiritual while keeping our feet on the ground. Take what resonates and nourish your soul. Hey friends, and welcome to today's episode where Janet and I were having a little talk as we do before we get on. And we really wanted to just share more in depth than we already have about what spirituality actually means to us. Because this is a word that gets thrown around a lot. There's a lot of opinions on it, versions of it. And to be honest, like how I view spirituality is somewhat similar to Janet's view, but there's still some differences. And you're going to find that with almost every single person that you end up having a conversation with about spirituality, right? And we'll kind of get into some of the laws too, because I think it's also important for us to have conversations that push each other to think of a different perspective, right? Or as we say, take what resonates and leave the rest behind, because not everything is for everyone. All right. So I don't know if there's anything you want to tie into, like, Janet, like our broader view of spirituality, because it's really, we were like struggling with coming up with a definition, even because it means so many things to so many people and it's so important.
Yeah.
But my biggest, if I had to put one thing that spirituality truly means to me is oneness with all plants, inorganic objects, organic objects, people, countries, places, animals, all of it. We're all connected energetically and feed off of the energies of people and things that we're surrounded by. So Janet, like thinking of your idea of like the broader view of spirituality, and if you had to just think of like one of the many things that, spirituality means to you, what would it be?
Holy cow. Well, to me, it's the belief that there is kind of like a source origin. Mm-hmm. So all things came from source, and in various aspects or perspectives, it may be called God, it may be called spirit, it may be called earth, it may be called whatever you want to view it as. But my perspective is a lot more cosmic and grounded. So, but I think that we're here to ground the cosmic. I think we're here to ground the experiences within us, all around us. So I love, oneness, law of one, or divine oneness, that where everything is interconnected, everything is relational to each other. But I think that one law that I would love to start my perspective off here with is the law of relativity. So as it relates to law of relativity, everything is relative. Everything has its own relativism as it relates to each other. Mm-hmm. So the perspective of how I view from here is not the perspective of how I would view this scene of where I am if I were standing outside of this window that's right by me. So relativism is essential in how we all perceive everything, from spirituality to religion to motherhood to what kind of employee you are. Everything has its own perspective. Mm-hmm. So living that way has actually made my life fantastic, because I can understand that we're all perceiving from where we are. And it creates an immense amount of love for me, for all things, the villain and the saint, and everyone in between, because I think that we are all encompassed by both things. So yeah, for me, overall, spirituality really is based in oneness as well, but slightly different, because I think that the source energy also creates all things. So eventually people come into existence, and through thought, manifestation, and creation, people even create the mouse that's sitting here in front of my computer. Mm-hmm. And all things are continuing to create at all times. Mm-hmm. So that creation is continuously expanding, just like our soul is expanding. So for me, spirituality and its purpose is coming to earth, learning how to ground it as it relates to our human perspective, mm-hmm. and then learning to live in its balance from there.
Yeah. Two things came through when you were speaking, because second you mentioned cosmic, is this saying that I've been hearing so much over the last several years, is that we're not humans having spiritual experiences. We're spiritual bodies having a human experience. So that oneness, even bringing it out of earth into the cosmos, into this idea of the connection, and then bringing it back to the ground, to the earth, about what we're experiencing now. And I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, where spirituality has had such an evolution, right? Because we're constantly changing. So where spirituality once was everyone trying to get up there, like leave the bodies, leave this earth plane, experience the magic of the cosmos. But where I feel spirituality has helped me was bringing those principles down on this earth and literally making us magicians of like how to manipulate energy, how to understand that relativity that we're experiencing, that oneness that we're experiencing here on earth. That has been profound for my healing. Was if I was constantly in the past trying to escape, I'm never going to get out. It's like this unattainable mountaintop that if I could just get there, if I can just get there and be like this, I'll be happy. I'll be free. I'll have more love in my life. But what I've been learning with my healing and bringing the spiritual principles into my everyday life was I can actually bring that mountaintop to me and create the mountain that I'm on, by honoring these spiritual principles. And another thing that came up too, when you were speaking, Janet, was the path is another thing that gets thrown around a lot. What is my path? What is my life purpose? I see that with so many brand new clients, right? Which is why they're seeking out more spiritual mentoringship too. You know, the therapy has its place for sure. The medicine has its place for sure. But now people are opening up to the spiritual component on the path. So honoring that everyone else has their own relativity and their own perspective was super freeing for me. That instead of me trying to get everyone to see me, I was seeing myself and then honoring where that person's perspective was or is, and knowing that that has a place. So for me, that was really profound also for my healing journey.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, how are you using your spirituality? So one of my biggest takeaways just in the last couple of weeks is that this is a practice.
Mm-hmm.
This is a practice. So because and I truly like to learn, and I've been actively researching more the laws of the universe, like the law of rhythm, the law of vibration, the law of polarity. And the majority of my healing that I've been able to access has come from understanding the law of polarity, or the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, right? Like there's so many stress levels that we'll find ourselves in, and we don't really take ownership over the fact that we're responsible for determining what will happen with those levels, right? And that the thoughts themselves have this power to eventually manifest our physical reality. So kind of what you were talking about the mountain, and like, I'm going to bring that mountain to me. Well, the thing is, what has happened, I think, in the past with various belief systems, and I'll just call it all belief systems, put whatever option or spirit or religion or whatever you want under that, is that we were the subordinate. And we were less than, and we have to ask from outside of ourselves. But I'm learning the more present I become, and guys, let me tell you what, that is my biggest obstacle is being present. I get really hyper and like start going on my own roller coaster slides, kind of like almost self-abusing with like future possibilities as opposed to just being right here. But the more I live right here, the more I realize how I can bring something into my awareness, or literally have like something delivered to my front door and just thinking it. Mm-hmm. So what I'm fascinated about right now in spirituality is the mind. Mm-hmm. So there, even in my spiritual journey, there's been these facets of, okay, cool, let's read about metaphysics and the science behind it. I'm really fascinated by the science behind it. My get out of jail free card is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Okay. Like, yes, please. Neil, hit me up. But I've then, have become fascinated by the universal laws. There's 12 universal laws. And then, presently I'm fascinated by the mind, and how the mind works with these laws, and how there's cause and effect. And if you look at these spiritual laws, they're very practical. They're things that people have been practicing for millennia, do unto others as you want unto you. Okay. Or like law of compensation, like energetic exchange and things like that. So law of polarity, to every good thing there's a bad thing. To every positive thing, there's a negative. To every, right? So balance. So all of these things have come together in a way much more cohesively, to where I'm realizing that the place that we get to dictate a lot of our life and creations is in the mind. But when there is mind, heart,
Yes.
what do we call that? Correlation, connection. What's his face? I like this guy.
Alignment.
Yeah, alignment. We'll call it alignment. When they're in alignment, you do this even faster. So that's where like living authentically, which I think we talked about in our last episode, comes into play. Are you living who you are? And is your mind showing up to think that way?
Right.
And when you do, you're creating so much more quickly, but you're creating healing. You're creating relationship bonds. You're creating abundance. And I don't even mean just monetarily. I'm meaning like abundance in relationships, abundance in experience, abundance in your thinking, abundance in viewing yourself to be more than. So yeah, spirituality for me is a practice. And once I do these healings, or once I have these new understandings, it is my mission to learn how to walk it and integrate it, embody it. And then from there, I get to come on here and have this amazing platform to request Neil to come be my side piece.
Girl, 100% about all of it, creating, manifesting, and all these different laws and how they all are interconnected and work, and like how we can manifest whatever it is that we want. But the piece that really just struck me was like, my spirituality has actually given me more inner power than I've ever thought was even possible. Like I thought I had good inner power and a good understanding and a good framework for who I was at the time, but now I'm seeing more authentically integrating all the different parts of myself with not as much judgment. I feel like my upbringing, so much judgment. It's like it was so difficult to navigate each day pleasing other people or doing what was expected. There's so many expectations. There were so many rules, so many things you should be doing. And that was part of more of a, I guess, a religious upbringing, to say. And then as I challenged or started understanding my gifts, you know, of like who I am in this lifetime and like abilities. And I don't even like, I said gifts, but I don't like the word gifts because I really do think we're all born with abilities, however you want to perceive those abilities. But in the spiritual world, these abilities didn't make sense in the paradigm that I was brought up in. So then I ignored parts of myself. But what I'm discovering now is how to look at myself more holistically and giving space and time to all the parts of myself without judgment.
Absolutely.
You know, like
Absolutely.
letting that inner power really come forth now.
Oh my gosh.
So everyone
absolutely.
watch out if y'all thought it was powerful or badass before. This new version of myself that's coming out now, you know, through this healing process, through this awakening process, whatever word you want to put on it, it's this whole other level, you know, and I'm seeing it with all of my clients right now, you know, left and right. So
yeah. And by the way, I want to like almost add this, what Milena and I view spirituality to be today might very well be a little different in a few years from now. Because we would have more understanding in our human experience. We would have more understanding in what we've created. We would have more understanding in the delicacy and power that we have in the mind. Because the universe is listening to you at all times. What are you telling it?
Yes.
What are you telling it?
That's something I've been, you know, working on with a lot of my clients. Is the mind basically is an antenna with a frequency, and it's sending out everything that you're thinking. So if you're in a self-abusing place where you're just feeling really low about yourself, your self-worth isn't very high, your self-esteem isn't very high, and you're just going on and on, because we're really terrible to ourselves, even more so than other people in our lives may be, you know, we can really beat ourselves down. That antenna is sending out these frequencies, and you maybe start seeing the evidence of that in your life, where people around you aren't respecting you. They don't value your worth, because I wasn't valuing my worth. I wasn't valuing who I was. And so with the ideas you're bringing in with the mind, doesn't seem spiritual, but it's so spiritual in the way I also view it. Like,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
the tools I've been learning with the mind and the heart in alignment, I can now catch myself if I am in a self-abusing cycle of like the thoughts. I could be like, okay, that was maybe enough for today or for this hour. Let me start actually listing what I'm grateful for and all the things I've done right today, you know, and just try to like offset that has been like a tool I've learned in discovering the spiritual side of myself. But it like the spirituality can also be very practical.
Oh yeah, it really can. Actually, I think that's a big key, is that it's much more simple than we realize.
Yes.
And one of my favorite things is that I started studying this practice or learning from teachers or asking for it to come in for me through the evidence of my reality, in such a way that was very unknowing. I think that's most of us who study this. It's like you just start to humble yourself and I don't know. I'm curious, show me. I don't know. I'm curious, show me. But almost every time I'm just tickled that the laws of the universe start to show themselves in a very precise, perfect order. So like law of oneness, everything serves everything, everything's interconnected. And why? Because everything vibrates, law of vibration. And then why? Because there's this correspondence on like a personal level that you're supposed to mirror to me something about, oh, sorry, I just hit the microphone, that you're supposed to mirror something to me that I am experiencing within myself.
Yeah.
And then that law of correspondence is that also like the law of attraction at play. I'm going to bring into my awareness or into my life or field who or what I am or in thinking. And then based off of what's coming in, there's going to be inspired action, which is the law of inspired action. Right. And so like these laws are constantly playing with each other. And we oftentimes don't even take ownership that we are the ones that are like basically orchestrating it all.
We're in the driver's seat.
Yeah, we're in the driver's seat. And we spiritually contract, in my opinion, in my belief system, to go through these experiences so that we can grow. And then after you go through those early laws that I just talked about, or I would say them early, but like they don't have to happen in that order necessarily. Then everything in the universe is constantly evolving and fluctuating, which is the law of transmutation.
Yeah. Everything's constantly changing.
Yeah. And then based off of what inspired action you take or don't take, then there's the law of cause and effect.
And there's also a law that you mentioned to me before of like whatever you're gonna have to clarify this, but whatever has like the higher, whatever thought or change that needs to happen for the best and highest good will be the one that elevates and is the one that will happen in a way, right?
Yeah. I think
And
that
the best and highest good isn't always happy, joyful, loving. It can be the polar opposite of it, of some chaos and shit has to burn to the ground in order to like recreate or create what's meant to create. So there's that too.
Yeah. And that would be like the law of rhythm, right? We go through these various patterns, be it physically or emotionally or whatever it is, because basically it's a way that like if you think that we expect ourselves to be one way all the time, then these events have to come in to help create that change through the law of rhythm.
That was so freeing for me to understand that chaos serves purpose, like really does, especially when you're in it and you're feeling it and it's hard and you just want to give up, you know? That was really freeing for me to like come to a place that was serving purpose.
Yeah. And, and then for me, I was in such judgment of that chaos.
The judgment,
that I had to start really understanding more about the laws of polarity. There is rain, there is drought, there is light, there is dark, there is cold, there is warmth, and how it exists in all things. There is life, there is death. And I think that part of it, and even if we like looked at that one thing and looked at it as it relates to our relationships, because we've watched television, media, read books, listen to stories, there's this tendency, especially like in American culture, to like love the underdog. But we want the underdog to start in this lower place, and then we want to see them strive and survive and overcome the obstacle and end up in this higher place. But the truth of the matter is that the underdog didn't even have to be perceived as the underdog. The underdog could have just been perceived as like, oh, this is part of the vacillation. This is just part of it. It's dark today. It might, it's going to be light in a few hours.
That just hit me hard, girl, because why do we even label them as the underdog? That's just them living their life and finding their path and living their truth.
Yeah. And guys, and I love movies. Okay. Like I love movies. They're so much fun to me, but movies, books, media, like they are looking to create dopamine for you. And if they didn't label it the underdog, it wouldn't engage you in the story the same way.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like what we end up doing to ourselves too.
So that's really, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So we end up being stuck in the perception of the underdog even longer.
Yeah. So I feel like spiritual principles have really been, you might have heard this out there, like breaking through the matrix,
Oh yeah.
starting to figure out like your authentic self versus like that cookie cutter version that you may have spent most of your life holding together for whatever, like that actor, that role, you know?
Yeah.
And we're all actors and play roles for each other. And then we all have actors in our own play. Okay. So
Yeah.
there's always like these things going on. But when we show up more authentically, without apology for being us, breaking through the matrix per se, then it's so freeing, you know, like it's like I could fly or I could figure out new ways of being, and I'm creating and I'm bringing the mountain to me, which somebody would say was impossible, or somebody may call it a miracle, you
Yeah.
know. But it's just co-creating with the laws that are actually in existence that were just not shown.
Yeah.
And I think there was a very much of a hive mind component to spirituality and just being a human and whatever situation you were born into, right? But more and more people now are waking up and finding the individual inner power part, and then now learning the skills on how to manipulate their environment. Manipulate might not be the best word, but like, you know, transmute the environment for what they want.
Yeah.
Without guilt, shame, or blame.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, manipulation has, and all this is law of relativity. I'm going to apply it to manipulation. Manipulation has negative connotations to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not all good or all bad. Would you want to manipulate, you know, how you're going to cook something that you're about to eat?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and similarly, there are moments where it's beneficial to manipulate. You're going to want to manipulate your thinking and your thoughts. If you're in the downward spiral of I am bad, I am not enough, I don't deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So even there's a transmutation that we have power over in even changing the connotation, meaning, and polarity that we've assigned to a word. Knowing that the word comes in good and bad.
Yeah.
Right. Power or subordination actually is powerful as well. So spirituality, yeah, I feel like same thing. I'm going to talk about the matrix, spirituality in the matrix. I think that there's a lot of people that I keep meeting like, we're stuck in the matrix, man, we're stuck. So if you believe you are stuck in the matrix, my friend, you are stuck in the matrix.
Yeah.
And the matrix was only created by your thoughts anyway, or the perspective that there is a matrix to begin with.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So yeah, but learning to live in this embodied body, learning to live as the spiritual being in this human experience is the most rewarding and powerful experience you will ever have when you start to really accept that you designed it this way. You agreed to come here to be in these limitations. You agreed to come here and have these experiences, and you agreed to live within the constructs, paradigms, and limitations that can exist if you choose to view them that way.
Yeah.
Choice.
And that's where like my healing really started going really fast, like exponentially faster, was starting to, I'm trying to even think of how to put this into words. You know, I have a therapy background, a counseling background, and we talk about the mind a lot, right? But I got stuck for a while in the, why did this happen to me? Oh, this is why it happened to me. And then like staying with that story. All right. But I wasn't actually making any change on the story. I was choosing to still live in that story. So I was getting more of that story.
Yeah.
And I was very miserable. And then once I met my spiritual mentor, who started showing me some of these laws and how to make change, it happened very quickly. And I say quickly, like a year or two, right? But I had spent a lifetime analyzing the problems to death, having drinks with my girlfriends and just like analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, and then going home with no resolve. It just felt good it does feel amazing to get things off your chest, right? There is profound healing in just that part, but I wanted more, right? I wanted to create more of what I wanted and less of what I didn't want. And so once I really started stepping into the fact that I have inner power, the ability to change, the ability to choose what I want, because I think every human being has the right to choose the life that they want, even if it does cause chaos for other people, there's, purpose in that too. But it was so empowering to know that I didn't have to live that story anymore. Not that I erased the story, but I really understood the true power of forgiveness and of just letting things be the way they were, and then choosing that I didn't want that anymore.
Yeah.
And spirituality helped me understand that very clearly.
And it's incredible because I think that I'm sure you've had this happen. Have you met people and they're like, oh, you're brainwashed. Something's going on with Elena.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, I scared people at the beginning, guys. I know I did. I was the talk of the town for a little bit.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't doubt that we still scare people. Suckers.
I mean, yeah, I am a medium talking to ancestors and some dead people, but that's a whole nother maybe episode.
Yeah, we need to do an episode about that for sure. But yeah, and I think it's fascinating because like everyone's just functioning from their perspective. Mm-hmm. All of us at all times, right? Mm-hmm. So what does it look like for us to, in spirituality, and for those of us, or those of you who are already on this per se path or journey, and you've been seeking and looking outside of yourself, studying, researching, following, looking for gurus or mediums, if there's one thing that I think that Milena and I do agree upon, which is why we started this podcast, was to help you understand that basically the more that you learn to understand about yourself, and the more that you can conceptualize things like these universal principles and integrate them into your world and then walk them, mm-hmm. then that's when we kind of start seeking outside of ourselves no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really start to just know that you can have your answers from within you. You can trust your knowing. You can continue to live your life through curiosity, like the eyes of a child, and mm-hmm. keep learning. You do have this realization, holy cow, I really do know nothing.
That was big for me too, because going back to like the stories and the analyzing, it worked for me to like understand, but I didn't have to hold that as truth anymore, because honestly, the perception, even that evolved. So we have the choice that we can be open to the other perspectives again, kind of going back in the beginning of like having these open conversations with people and without judgment, without getting, it doesn't always have to go to a heated place, but just being open to understand another's perception or point of view. Sometimes there's a little golden nugget in there that you were actually meant to hear from that person that could be the link or the puzzle piece that just goes, holy shit. That just changed everything for me. And it could come from the people you would not even expect. And that's the beauty of it too. It doesn't have to always come from the teacher or the mentor. Sometimes it's just somebody on the grocery store that tells you something and you're like, did somebody tell you to tell me that? Like, because there's also, I believe, the oneness and the divine guidance and I believe that our ancestors, and I guess we'll get into it a little bit, but our ancestors and our divine teams are constantly helping us. So just being open to receiving messages and help when we need to hear it. Oh
my gosh, I love that. You know what? It made me kind of think of this little excerpt, and I think in Eckhart Tolle's book. I don't know which one because I read them all, but a long time ago. But basically he's talking about being like on a subway or something. And then there's this man who's frantically saying all of his thoughts out loud. And he looks like a crazy man. And the thoughts are random and crazy, chaotic. And I loved it when Eckhart Tolle says, and then I realized maybe he's not the crazy one, I am. Because my thoughts sound exactly the same, as erratic and compulsive and vacillating as his. The only difference is that mine are kept inside.
Yes, because we talk like that too. And then I'm almost going a whole nother route. what if he's just reading the subway and like feeding off the energy of everyone who's there? And there's a little nugget for all of them. I don't know,
Absolutely. I have met people. Yeah.
Because there's another component to when we talk about abilities, that people, since we are born with these abilities, if we're not nurtured in them, you're crazy. How are you? Basically, we try to get free framed or like put back into the box of what the expectations of how we're supposed to be. So a lot of my clients actually that have come to me in the last 6 months particularly are starting to explore these parts of themselves that they were told to shut down because it was too crazy. And I'm like, well, let me just hold some space for you to start exploring. And let me just tell you that you may not be that crazy. Like you actually might, there is something there. It's just these abilities, and because of the spirituality component that you weren't nurtured in, that it doesn't know how to be, a lot of my childhood fears, being scared of the dark is because I knew I wasn't alone in the room, but if I went to my parents, they were like, oh, it's fine. Just go to bed. There's nobody there. So they're telling me there's nobody there, but I know there's somebody there. So it's like, am I crazy?
Yeah. My parents are probably going to listen to this, and that's okay. But I remember when I was going through my divorce and I was kind of the pain, the depth of it, guys. My paradigms around marriage were so big. Okay. So they were real big. And so the pain that I went through when it happened was so immense that suddenly as I started to have my reawakening and discovering, remembering more things about myself. And I remember my dad asked my mom, like, is she like, what's going on with her? Like, is she okay? This is basically like, he was also amazed, right? He was like, Janet's like this new person, is what he told to my mom. And my mom, I felt so validated, not that I needed her to validate it, but it was evident as part of my healing. She tells him, no, this is who Janet always was. She just found herself again. And so that being the case, it was really beautiful because I can remember being like this when I was little. I can remember being the teacher, being the guide, having information, trying to comfort my mother in various scenarios because I was the elder. But I shut it down when I go into the institutions of the schooling. I shut it down because of the siblings. I shut it down because I'm perceived in a negative way. I stopped living my authenticity because of the projected perceptions. So I gave away my power.
Yeah.
But it's really neat because now as I'm rededicating myself to learn more about authentically how I am and who I am learning about more of my abilities. And they're weird sometimes.
Yeah.
They're weird.
So there's so many components to spirituality, I think is what we're going to be ending on today, is like, there's the old paradigms that are all literally being rewritten. Okay. There's some paradigms that still hold truth along all on the spectrum of whatever, you want to label it as. And then the world's changing. We're changing, and more people are now stepping up and trying to reclaim their inner power, their authentic selves. So there's versions in what that looks like. And I think we're headed in such a beautiful place, but with change comes the chaos. So the more of us that awaken, heal, drop the baggage, and just walk our walk more authentically, you will be there for the next person when they start the process. Because there's always those elements of like where somebody's at in the process to where you're at. And by no means am I even towards the end of this process, because even in the last 6 months, the changes I've done to me are miraculous. But the people energetically that are drawn to you, you guys are going to have kind of the same energies, and things are going to change and relationships change. And then, even my clients, like the clients I first started getting when I first started out, presented kind of with like some different issues. And now I'm seeing another cluster of people like stepping into their power and their abilities, because it's more of a reflection also of where I'm at in my work and in my own healing. So there's just like all of these components of what I think spirituality means. So I may have started with like the one of the oneness, because I do believe in that one so hardcore, but all of these components are part of the spiritual experience. And we didn't even get into the heady, miraculous, like, am I tripping out experiences? But there's that component too, you know, where you're like, whoa, there's so much more on this planet than I even thought was possible in my paradigm.
Oh yeah. The things, and that's fascinating to me. Like I've met people who function as those, what are we going to call them? Plants, healing plants. I don't know what to call them.
Psychedelics.
Psychedelics. Sure.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't have a lot of experience. So I think one of my old, I can't remember who it was, an old friend of mine would say, it's not called the marijuana. You're like, you mean the marijuana?
That's really cute. You used to call it the marijuana.
I didn't have a lot of experience with these things. I had experience with like nerd ropes. Okay, guys. America, where you can eat all the colors of the rainbow on a gummy all at the same time. But yeah, so as it relates to all of these pieces, there's people on earth who can transmute such a level of energy for you as healers that it can have similar effects to what those healing plants can do for you.
I mean, look at the news right now. I'm seeing stuff every single day on the medicinal purposes of mushrooms and, you know, the benefits it could have and how non-addictive that is compared to where we've been. So look at a whole nother paradigm shift that's happening right before our eyes.
Yep. Absolutely.
And just marijuana, even when we were younger kids, was absolutely a no. Then it became, let's give it to cancer patients to help with their nausea. Now it's more and more states are legalizing it because they understand that there is a medicinal purpose for it. The earth didn't just create these plants. There's purpose. So once we start even understanding plants, let's talk about this as a perfect example of the purpose and not in judgment of it, we're opening up to all of these capabilities and possibilities that now we have in this new plant. Absolutely. Or this new mushroom. Or so if we even use those components to just being open-minded when we're having conversations with somebody who we may have already judged, well, they got nothing to give me. They're like this. They're an ABC kind of person. I'm a DEF kind of person, whatever. Let's be open to it. Let's go have conversations with those other people, because that I think is also making some real change too.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So it's possible, friends. The spiritual path for us, it's everything, all correlated, interrelated. Everything is spiritual.
Everything. I guess that's where we're in today. And I feel like we're going to be having these conversations just specifically on this many, many, many a times. Probably. Because this is only the tip of the iceberg of some of the principles and ideas. But I think right now of where I'm at in my healing journey, that has been such a game changer of understanding I'm not alone. We're all interconnected. I have choice and I have power. And I have really cool abilities in just like how I show up in the world and how I am. So think, you guys, of where you're at and just give yourself some credit of like how far you've come already with whatever you've done.
Hell yes. See yourself. No one else will ever see you if you don't see yourself. Heck yeah. That's beautifully said, my friend. Thank you so much. We love you guys and have an awesome day.
Bye. If you liked what you heard today and want to see more about our offerings and gifts, please join our email list at heartfulbeings.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Heartful Beings.
Please note that our perspectives and views of the following content are ours and are not necessarily substitute to our holistic views and approaches to healing. Both of us believe in the numerous support tools available to all, which include and are not limited to therapy, mental health treatment, medical, prescription, and other types of traditional or alternative healthcare.